I bought a house for my mother and paid all the bills, but in a family meeting she said, "You give us nothing but headaches." Everyone took her side until I announced I would no longer pay for her luxurious lifestyle. I could still hear the echo of my mother's words long after she had spoken them. "You never give us anything but headaches." The dining room fell into a heavy silence. My family avoided looking at me. My uncle stirred his coffee. My aunt shifted uneasily in her seat. And my cousins suddenly found their phones incredibly interesting. But no one, not a single one, spoke in my defense. The blow hurt more than I was willing to admit. I had bought this house for my mother. I had covered every bill. Electricity, water, food, even the internet that my younger cousins used to watch their favorite shows. I made sure she never had to choose between a warm house or a full fridge. And yet, in front of the whole family, she had discarded me as if I were nothing. I clenched my hands under the table, forcing myself to keep a neutral face. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. "That's not fair, Mom," I finally said, my voice calm but firm. "I pay for everything. This house, the bills, the food. And you never let us forget it," she interrupted me sharply. "You act like you're doing us a favor, but a real daughter wouldn't keep track." A real daughter. I swallowed hard, the lump forming in my throat, and scanned the room. My brother Matteo reclined in his chair, arms crossed, face inscrutable. My sister-in-law avoided my gaze. My cousins remained silent. No one was on my side. I took a deep breath. "Okay," I said. My mother frowned. "Okay, what?" "Okay," I repeated, standing up and pushing my chair back. "If helping is a burden, then I'll stop being a burden to you." The atmosphere tensed. My mother's lips parted slightly, as if she had expected me to argue, to beg for some recognition. But I was done begging for something I should have received without asking. "I'm done paying for this house. I'm done covering your bills. I'm done financing this entire family while being treated like a stranger." My uncle coughed uncomfortably. My aunt's eyes widened in surprise. Matteo finally leaned forward. "Wait a second." "No," I interrupted, shaking my head. Everyone stayed silent when she said that to me. Everyone let her pretend I'm nothing more than a nuisance. "Well, let's see how you all manage without me." My breath quickened more than I wanted, and my heart pounded against my ribs. I had done it. For the first time in years I had set a boundary. And yet, instead of feeling free, all I felt was emptiness. I got into my car and gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I knew what would come next. My mother would twist my words, the family would take her side, and soon I'd be painted as the selfish, ungrateful daughter who abandoned them. But this time I wouldn't let them drag me back. My phone buzzed. "Mom, get back inside. You're overreacting." Another message. "Matteo, what are you doing? You can't just leave like this." I turned off my phone and drove away. For the next few days, my family's silence was deafening. No calls, no messages, nothing. It was unsettling, like the calm before the storm. And then, on the third day, the messages started pouring in. "Mom, the electricity bill is due soon. I hope you're not serious about what you said. Matteo, Mom is crying. Do you really want to do this to her? Lucia." "Honey, families have disagreements, but cutting everyone off isn't the answer. Let's talk." I ignored them all. And then, as if written in a script, the guilt turned into rage. "Mom, I can't believe you're doing this to us after everything I've done for you. Matteo, you're so selfish. You think you're better than us just because you have money." Selfish. Again, that word. The same one they used every time I didn't bend over backward to please them. I let out a dry, humorless laugh, tossing my phone onto my bed. And then came the knock on the door. I knew who it was before I even opened it. Matteo stood on my porch, arms crossed, face twisted in irritation. "You made your point," he said. "Now stop being dramatic and fix this." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Fix what?" "You know what," he snapped. "Mom's losing it. Bills are piling up. And you're just gone." I tilted my head. "And why would that be my problem?" His jaw tightened. "Because you always take care of everything. And maybe that's the problem," I replied calmly. "Maybe it's time someone else stepped up." Matteo let out a dry laugh. "Someone else? Mom, she doesn't work. I have my own expenses." I raised an eyebrow. And I don't? You earn more than all of us. He spat out in frustration. It's not the same. Ah, there it was. The real reason they believed they were entitled to my money. Me earning more doesn't mean I owe you anything, I said, my tone even. I bought that house for Mom. I covered every bill, every grocery run, every emergency. And instead of gratitude, all I get is that I give nothing but headaches. Period. Mateo exhaled forcefully, running a hand through his hair. She didn't mean it. She was upset. I shook my head. No. She meant it. And the worst part is no one defended me. Not even you. He looked away. Silent. For the first time I saw it. That flicker of guilt in his eyes. You don't understand, he finally mumbled. Mom's scared. She doesn't know how to handle this without you. Then maybe she should have thought about that before humiliating me in front of the whole family, I replied, taking a step back inside. I'm done. Mateo. Fix your own problems. And with that I closed the door. The chaos that followed the next week was a disaster. Mom called every relative she could, twisting the story to her advantage. She abandoned us. She's punishing me. Just because I asked for respect. She's selfish, greedy. She only cares about money. Some relatives sided with her immediately, messaging me about how family is everything and how I'd regret this someday. But others started to notice the cracks. Lucia. Honey, I didn't know you were paying for all of that. That's not fair to you. Raquel, wait. You bought the house and she still treats you like that? Mom didn't expect people to ask questions. And when they did, her perfect victim act began to crumble. At the end of the month she called me herself. Not to apologize, but to beg. Please just cover the bills for one more month. We're going through a rough patch. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and gave her the same answer I'd given Mateo. Fix it yourself. And for the first time in my life I felt free. Days passed, then weeks. I expected that sooner or later my mother would come around. That she would apologize. Admit she was wrong. At least acknowledge everything I had done for her all these years. But she didn't. Instead she doubled down. I started hearing rumors within the family. They said I had turned my back on my own mother. That I had left her in ruins. That I was so arrogant I believed money could replace love and family. And my personal favorite, that she had raised a selfish, ungrateful daughter who abandoned the woman who gave her life. It was ridiculous. Seriously, I had done everything for her. I bought her a house, paid her bills, made sure she was more secure than she could have ever imagined. The cracks in the victim's story all started with small fissures in her lie. One night I got a call from Lucia, one of Mom's biggest defenders. Honey, I went to visit your mother today. Oh yeah. She doesn't seem to be struggling. I frowned. What do you mean? I mean, she just bought a new dining set and was showing off a gold bracelet Mateo got her. My stomach churned. But she told everyone she didn't have money for food, that they were going to cut off the electricity. Lucia sighed. Well, if that's true, she's not acting like it. And it wasn't just Lucia. Other relatives started noticing things too. How Mateo still had money for weekend getaways. How Mom played the victim one minute, and the next was posting pictures on social media of lavish brunches with her friends. And then came the real kicker. Raquel called me. Hey, do you know how much your mother is charging Mateo for rent? What? I heard from his wife that she's only giving him $100 a month. My jaw almost hit the floor. $100. I had been paying for absolutely everything in that house, covering thousands of euros a month. And the minute I left, Mateo, who had a full-time job, was giving her a measly 100 euros? That was the last straw. I'd spent my entire life being the family bank, carrying their problems, sacrificing my own well-being so they could live comfortably. And now the moment I walked away, they weren't suffering. They were just pretending they were because they expected me to crawl back. But I was done. The final confrontation. That Sunday, I returned to the house for the first time in weeks. The moment I walked through the door, my mother's face twisted into an expression I knew all too well. Disapproval mixed with triumph. She thought I was there to apologize. Mateo was leaning against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, smug. I almost laughed. I took a deep breath and set my bag on the table. I want to make something clear, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I am never paying for anything in this house again. My mother scoffed. Oh please. We all know you'll come crawling back. You need us. Mateo smirked. Yeah, you're not going to let Mom suffer. We all know it. I tilted my head and stared at him, my expression neutral but calculating. How much are you paying in rent, Mateo? The smirk vanished. What? You heard me. Perfectly. Mateo looked at Mom, then back at me. That's none of your business. Oh, it absolutely is, I said, taking a step forward. See, I've been hearing interesting things lately, like how you've been giving Mom the impressive sum of $100 a month. Mom tensed. Who told you that? Does it matter? I said, crossing my arms. You've been telling the whole family she's suffering, that you're on the verge of ruin, that I abandoned you. Meanwhile, Mateo's giving you pocket change while you're buying gold bracelets. Mateo's face started to redden. That's fair. I interrupted. Reasonable? Because if it is, then my money should have been more than enough to last you for years. My mother's mouth opened, but no words came out. Silence. I let it stretch for a moment before speaking again. I'm not coming back, Mom, I said quietly. Not to this. Not to being used. Not to being disrespected after everything I've done for this family. I was your daughter, not your retirement plan. And if you can't see that, then it's not my problem anymore. For the first time, I saw something in her expression I'd never seen before. Not just surprise. Not just anger. Fear. Because she knew. She really knew that this time I wasn't bluffing. And I didn't have a backup plan. I picked up my bag and headed for the door. Mateo finally broke his silence. You're really going to leave us like this? I turned and looked him squarely in the eyes. You left me a long time ago, I said simply. And with that I walked out, leaving them with their own mess. This time I didn't look back. The silence was deafening. For years my phone had been inundated with messages from my family. Requests for money. Emotional manipulation. Complaints about how I never did enough. But after that night it was as if I had vanished from their world. Not a single desperate message from my mother. Not a single angry complaint from Mateo. Nothing. And for the first time in my life I felt free. I thought I'd feel guilty. That maybe I'd wake up in the middle of the night wondering if I'd made a mistake. But instead each morning I felt lighter. As if I'd finally stepped out of a cage I hadn't even known I was trapped in. I went out with friends without calculating how much I had left after paying my mother's bills. I bought myself new clothes without hearing her voice in my head telling me that spending money on myself was selfish. I even booked a trip, something I'd never allowed myself to do because every extra euro went toward keeping my family comfortable. And yet, despite my silence, I knew they were struggling. Raquel kept me informed, though I never asked. Mateo is losing his mind. Mom told him he has to pay full rent now, and he's furious. I smiled. Oh, you mean live like a normal adult? Exactly. He's been trying to manipulate the whole family into helping him out, but no one is falling for it. Good. And your mom? She's still trying to keep up appearances, but the cracks are showing. She doesn't go out as much. She's been telling everyone you abandoned her. But even Lucia is starting to question her story. People are realizing she lived way too well with you and blew it. That should have made me feel vindicated. But it didn't. Because deep down, I knew that no matter how bad things got for them, Mom would never admit she was wrong. She would rather suffer. She would rather lose everything than accept that she had pushed away the one person who had done everything for her. And the truth was that wasn't my problem anymore. The call that changed everything. 3 months passed before I heard from her again. It was late. I had just gotten home after dinner with some friends, something I was doing more often lately. It felt good to have a life outside the constant demands of my family. My phone buzzed. Mom. I stared at the screen, feeling my heart beat a little faster. I could ignore it. I should ignore it. But against my better judgment, I answered. Hello. There was a long silence on the other end, then a heavy sigh. You really meant it, didn't you? I swallowed. Yes, Mom. I meant it. Another silence. Then a bitter laugh. I didn't think you were capable. Well, I was. So that's it? You're just pretending we don't exist. I sighed, rubbing my temples. I'm not pretending anything, Mom. You made it clear how you saw me. I was just the one who paid the bills. And the minute I stopped, you discarded me. I did not. Yes, you did. Silence. And then finally she spoke. I'm going through a rough patch. I closed my eyes. I know. You could fix this. Just help a little. Just for a few months until we get back on our feet. No, her voice hardened. You're really going to let your own mother suffer? And there it was. The guilt. The same weapon she had used my entire life. But this time it didn't work. Mom, I said softly. I already gave you everything I could. And it was never enough. It was never going to be enough. If I give you money now, what will change in 3 months? You'll be in exactly the same place asking for more. This time is different. No, it isn't, I interrupted. And deep down, you know it. She didn't say anything. You never planned for a future where I wasn't paying for everything, I continued. And now you're realizing that was a mistake. But it's not my mistake to fix. Her breathing hitched slightly, and for a moment I thought she was going to cry. But when she spoke again, her voice was cold. Fine. If you want to be so heartless, then don't expect us to welcome you back when you finally come to your senses. I let out a slow breath. I won't. And then for the first time in my life I hung up on her. The realization. I stared at my phone for a long time after that call. I had expected to feel guilty. I had expected to feel that old familiar knot in my chest, the one that had kept me tethered to my family for so many years. But all I felt was peace. Because this time I hadn't let her manipulate me. This time I had chosen myself. And maybe, just maybe, that was the biggest victory of all. An unexpected freedom. Weeks passed, then months. I waited for the guilt to show up. That crushing loneliness Mom had promised I would feel. But it never came. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: relief. For the first time in my life, I didn't wake up with a knot of anxiety in my chest, wondering what the next financial crisis my family would throw at me would be. I didn't check my bank account every day, calculating how much I could afford to spend before they asked me for more. I was free. And I wasn't just surviving, I was living. I started to travel, something I'd never allowed myself to do before. I went to Spain. Sat in a small cafe in Valencia and let the sun warm my skin. Took a weekend trip to the Pyrenees and hiked trails I never thought I'd have the time or money to explore. I decorated my apartment, turning it into a home that finally reflected who I was, and not a life sacrificed for others. I went out with friends, laughed until my stomach hurt, and didn't have to justify how I spent my money. And best of all, I didn't have to explain myself to anyone. No one was watching my every move, judging what I did or didn't do for them. No one was keeping a mental tally of what I owed them. I was done being my family's human ATM. And it was the best decision I'd ever made. The unexpected apology. One night, as I was sitting on my balcony enjoying a glass of wine, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Mateo. I almost didn't answer. Almost. But curiosity got the better of me. Hello. There was a long pause and finally, how are you? I blinked. How am I? He let out a long sigh. I should have been on your side that night at the family dinner, when Mom humiliated you. I didn't say anything. I just let her talk. I guess I thought you'd always be there. That no matter what we threw at you, you'd keep taking care of everything. And when you left, I had to step up. And I realized everything you did. Another pause. Then, I'm sorry. I exhaled slowly, gripping my wine glass a little tighter. What changed? I finally asked. Mateo let out a dry laugh. Mom, what do you mean? She's still playing the victim, he admitted. Still telling everyone you abandoned her. But now that I'm the one covering the expenses, she's treating me exactly the same. Nothing is ever enough. The more I give, the more she expects. I sighed. Yeah, I know how that feels. I don't know how you put up with it for so long, Mateo murmured, his voice tired. Because I thought I had to, I replied simply. The silence stretched between us. Then Mateo cleared his throat. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I needed to say it. I was a terrible brother. And I see that now. I closed my eyes, letting his words sink in. I wasn't sure if I was ready to forgive him. But for the first time in years, I wasn't bracing myself. He was just apologizing. And maybe for now that was enough. The final goodbye. A few weeks later, I got another call. This time from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something in my gut told me to answer. Hello. So, you think you're better than us now? I let out a sigh. Hello to you too, Mom. You've embarrassed this family, she spat. Just walking away like that. Everyone knows what you did. Oh yeah? And exactly what did I do? I asked, my voice eerily calm. You left me suffering. I almost laughed. Suffering, I repeated. You mean when I worked tirelessly to make sure you lived comfortably for years? When I paid for everything while you sat back and judged me? I raised you, she yelled. And I repaid you 1,000 times over, more than any child should ever have to, I replied. Silence. You think you don't need me? She finally asked, her voice quieter now. I know I don't need you, I corrected. And that terrifies you, doesn't it? More silence. Then she did what she always did. She laughed. You'll be back, she said. Someday you'll realize that family is all you have. And when that day comes, don't expect me to welcome you with open arms. I smiled. I won't. And for the last time I hung up. Epilogue. A life that is finally mine. A year later, I was sitting on the beach, watching the waves crash against the shore. I had moved to a new city, started a new life, found happiness in the quiet of being. No one expecting anything from me. Mom had tried to contact me a few more times, always with the same manipulation, the same guilt. I never responded. Mateo and I were talking again, slowly rebuilding what had been broken. I'd learned my lesson the hard way, and while I wasn't sure if we'd ever be close again, I appreciated his effort. And me? I was finally truly happy. Not being the family bank. Not being the scapegoat. Not living my life for others. I took a deep breath, letting the salty air fill my lungs. I was free, and I would never go back.